Good morning. It is Monday, December 14th, 2020. Back here for Bed Talk number, can you believe it? 190. 190. So amazing. Today I want to talk about vulnerability, and in particular, vulnerability in the context of leadership and a potential trap, or maybe even an intentional misuse of vulnerability. Just recently, at the end of last week, I was on a podcast and we are talking about vulnerability in leadership. And the host said, well, some leaders hear vulnerability in leadership and say, well, what you're really saying is you just want me to be myself, be vulnerable enough to be who I am. Well, I happen to be an angry person. If that's just who I am and how I am, then it's okay for me to be angry with people, to talk harshly to people, to even verbally abuse them under the guise of saying, hey, I'm just being vulnerable, which is what you told me to be, more of myself. Well, first of all, hopefully, nearly all of you said that's absurd. But I can kind of get where they're coming from, but there's a trap in it. And there's frankly a manipulation of the idea. First of all, authenticity is really the idea of being who you are, being more of yourself. Vulnerability is the act or actions where you bring that more of yourself to it. So, in other words, to be more authentic, I need to be more vulnerable. Make sense? So, they're not the same thing. Authenticity is more of myself. Vulnerability is required in order to bring more of myself to my relationships, to my business, to my leadership. But here's the thing, being vulnerable does not mean unleashing your emotions on others. It is not permission to take advantage of others, to manipulate others, to abuse others. In fact, because here's the collision that we need to keep in mind. Vulnerable leaders, part of that vulnerability is taking personal responsibility and ownership of the impacts they create, intended and unintended. So if you're going to take that personal responsibility and seek to minimize and eliminate those impacts, that means you're not going to engage in unhealthy communication, unhealthy behavior, or basically let your emotions fly and let them fly at the people around you. That's not vulnerability. In fact, it's simply abuse. And if you're not willing to work on that, to minimize that kind of impact you have on others around you, then you're not being a vulnerable leader. And I wonder what kind of leaders would leap to this idea of, hey, I could be more of me. Is that what it means? Because here's the thing we need to be clear on. Being more authentic might mean, frankly, that you show up as an asshole if you're an asshole. But that doesn't mean vulnerability in leadership does not mean, hey, I can be more of that authentic asshole at work because that's just who I am. If you're an authentic asshole, get the hell out of leadership, get out of the seat, get out of the way, and put someone in there who really cares about their people and is willing to do the work to get better in their own self-awareness and is committed to changing how they show up. That's a lot closer to what vulnerability is in leadership. So make no mistake, vulnerability is essential in leadership. And it's never an excuse to let your emotions fly, to run wild, or to say, hey, that's just who I am. Live with it. Because leaders, strong leaders, great leaders, impactful leaders, don't lead that way. And that is not in any way vulnerability. Keep taking care of yourself and everyone around you. And by all means, stay connected.